Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Easynomics. In today's video, we will be completing the topic of international trade theories which we started in the previous class. In the previous class, I have explained you the theory of mercantilism, absolute advantage and the theory of comparative advantage. While explaining the theory of comparative advantage, I just explained you by taking an example and explained the diagrams. But the question asked from the comparative advantage is also on the basis of the assumption and the empirical evidence of the comparative advantage. Even on every single theory, the assumptions and the empirical evidence should be prepared. So for the first 2 minutes, I'll be discussing the assumptions and the empirical evidence of the Ricardian comparative advantage theory or the opportunity cost theory. After that, I'll be starting with the Hecksher Ohlin theory. So let's get started. So let's first study the assumptions of Ricardian theory. Ricardo said that there will be only one factor of production, that is labor, which we discussed that only labor is present, and by using labor you can produce both the goods. Labor cannot migrate across the nation. Labor can migrate within nation, that is it can migrate within India from Rajasthan to Punjab to Delhi, etc., but it cannot migrate from India to China or China to US. Next assumption is cost of production, that is if you have only one cost of production, that is you are using only labor to produce tea or coffee, then the cost of production will also be dependent on that factor of production only, that is labor, and that is assumed to be constant for both the nation. That's why were discussing the theory of comparative advantage. Now, what is the cost of labor across the nation, and if there is a difference of cost, then we can trade. So if labor would be my if labor can migrate, then this theory will become redundant. Okay, now two commodities and two nations, like we discussed England and Portugal, and two nations and two commodities, like we discussed wine and coffee, etc. Then uske baad free trade hai, like zero transportation cost. You can trade without any transportation cost. Your good can be transported from India to China without any cost. That is not a realistic assumption. And you have constant technologies, that is if India have a set of technology, it is not going to increase in the short run. So this is the set of assumption taken by the Ricardo. Now comes to the empirical evidence. What were the studies conducted after this theory to prove that this theory was correct or not? So first, empirical evidence was conducted in 1952 by McDougall. It said that comparative advantage is strongly present. It has taken the data of 25 countries. Out of 25, in 20 countries, McDougall has found the evidence of Ricardo, especially in US and UK. Okay, now 1962, Samuelson conducted another test, and US, Europe, Japan, basically these countries were taken, and it also found that strongly that comparative advantage trade is strongly present, but it is less than the evidence found in 1952 test. Okay, then 1970, Baumol conducted another test, but he said that this is not a significant factor for inward looking economies like India and China. It is useful for developed country like US, UK, Europe, Japan, but not for India and China, which were inward looking economies. Now in 1981, Lucas conducted another test, which also said that it is not strongly present. Okay, now in 2003, last test was conducted by American Chamber of Commerce, and similar results were found. So by looking at the empirical test, we can conclude that mixed evidence is present. The presence of Ricardo is also found, and the not presence of and the absence of Ricardo is also found. So what we can conclude by these empirical evidences, uh, this theory is only for developed countries. Developing countries like India and China are not following the Ricardian theory, or they are not trading on the base of comparative advantage. Only developed countries is doing that. This theory is applicable only in long runs with less trade barriers, like US, UK. They are open economies, they are not very closed, or they very strong trade barriers are not present there, so they are following this in long run. After that, it cannot explain the intra-industry trade. Ricardo was not successful in explaining the intra-industry trade. So this completes our comparative advantage or Ricardo model. Now let's study the Hecksher Ohlin model, which is an development over the comparative advantage theory. Ricardo explained the complete specialization between the two countries and the two commodities. Suppose if India and China doing trade based on the comparative advantage, then India will be end up producing one good and the China will be end up producing another good, and they will trade. Now, what if the complete specialization would not occur? So this situation is explained by the Hecksher-Ohlin theory. So in Hecksher-Ohlin theory, we need to study these six things: assumptions, model, factor price equalization, factor intensity reversal, offer curve, and empirical evidence. So first, let's start with the assumptions of Hecksher-Ohlin theory. It has taken the 2 cross 2 cross 2 model, that is two nations, two commodities, and two factors of production. Till now, Ricardo assumed the one factor of production, that is labor. Now we are considering two factors of production, that is labor and capital. Now X is labor intensive and the good Y is capital intensive. X is producing using labor, Y is produced using capital. Country 1, that is whatever countries will be taken, in that country 1 is labor abundant and country 2 is capital abundant. Means, what do you understand by this abundance? Abundance has two meaning, that is demand and that is supply. So what if labor is, when labor is more physically available in one country than the other, then we say that supply of labor is more and labor is abundant from supply side. But when labor is relatively cheaper than capital, then we say that demand is more of labor and labor dependence is more. So for the same capital abundant, if capital is relatively more available or it is relatively cheaper, so labor abundance can have two meanings. Okay, so then no labor mobility, same assumption like Ricardo. Two nation, same technologies, same assumption. Both commodities have constant returns to scale. This is a new assumption. Perfect competition is there in factor and product market. And these are the assumptions taken by the Hecksher-Ohlin theory. Now let's study the model. What was the model of Hecksher-Ohlin? So, as per the Heckscher-Ohlin model, a nation would export that commodity in which production required intensive use of its relatively abundant and cheaper factor of production. It means if country 1 is relatively abundant in labor, then it will end up producing that commodity in which commodity requires intensive use of that factor of production. For example, X is labor intensive, country 1 has more labor, so country 1 will produce labor and country 2 will produce country 1 will produce commodity X and country 2 will produce Y. uh, there is nothing like that both the countries will producing only one commodity. They will produce combination of two commodities, but they will produce more of that commodity in which it has relatively abundance. So let's understand this using the diagram. So in the diagram that I have drawn here, this is good X and this is good Y. I have taken two production possibility frontiers. One is A2 B2, that is PPF of country 2, and A1 B1, that is PPF of country 1. Okay, two countries. These PPF are downward and concave. Downward, resources are limited, want to increase the production of one commodity, then you have to decrease the production of another commodity, so these are downward sloping. Other than this is concave to the origin because of uh, increasing opportunity cost or increasing marginal rate of transformation. Okay, so these are 2 points. Now the point A and A dash. These are 2 points without trade. It means if I forget about the PPF of second country, then this is the PPF of country 1. Without trade, country was producing at this point and consuming this much of good Y and this much of good X, producing and consuming same. Now if I forget about country 1 PPF, then country 2, they were producing at A dash without trade, consuming this much of Y and this much of X and producing also. So this was the situation before trade, and now if I join their A dash and A1, so this was their social welfare function. Okay, so now what we need to do, now we will allow them to trade. So when, just one more thing, this line, that is tangency, this was their equilibrium, they were producing at this point, so this slope should be tangent here, and similarly for this nation. So if you will observe that this price line equilibrium, when equilibrium will happen, when your mux upon mvy should be equals to px and py, so this price line should be tangent to this point and this point only, then you will be able to produce. So this price line is flatter as compared to this price line. It means slope of this uh, is lesser than the slope of this line. So I assumed that this slope of this line is 4, that is, sorry, px upon py is 4, and here the ratio is equals to 1 by 4, that is lesser than this. This is an assumed number. Okay, you just need to assume something lesser than this line. So you got the procedure till now. Now let's allow them to trade. Okay, now what country 1 will see, that it can produce good 1 at lesser cost, at matlab like good country 2 can produce good X by using 4 times more cost. Good X can be produced, good X can be produced in country 1 by 4 times lesser cost than the in country 2. So country X will increase the production of good X, and country Y, similarly in country Y, good Y can be produced 4 times lesser cost than it can be produced in country 2. So in country 1, so country 2 will produce more of good Y and less of good X. Similarly, country 1 will produce more of X and less of Y. This we assumed this, that country 1 is labor intensive and country 2 is capital intensive, and X is labor intensive and Y is capital intensive. So X will be produced in country 1, Y will be produced in country 2, and they will trade. But the catch here is, they won't produce only one good, they will produce combination of two goods. The thing is, they will produce relatively more of that commodity in which it has relatively abundance, which that commodity requires. Okay, so when they will produce, they will start trading, then this line can be produced, their trading line. This is known as their trading line. Now in trading line, they can produce and consume something here. So I have taken this as point E. After trading, they will be producing and consuming at point E. Now at point E, this is known as our social welfare function. So at point E, earlier country 2 was producing and consuming this much of X and Y. Now they are trading at E, so they have decreased the consumption of Y and they have increased the consumption of X. So this much commodity they will export, and this much commodity they will import of good X. Similarly at point A for country 1, earlier they were consuming at this point, so they were consuming that much of Y and that much of X. Now they are consuming this point, that much of X and that much of Y. So they have increased the consumption of Y by importing Y from country 2, and they have decreased the consumption of good X by decreasing the by increasing their export to country 2. So their consumption increase, their welfare increase, their utility increase by doing trade. They can now produce it at lesser cost. So this is the basic model of Hecksher Ohlin. This model is explained the incomplete specialization. See, both the countries producing both the goods, and now they are trading. They are not completely specialized in any one commodity like comparative advantage or Ricardo theory. So this is the new thing about the Heckscher-Ohlin theory. Let's further understand this model. Now let's just study the two concepts of Heckscher-Ohlin theory, that is factor equalization theory and the factor intensity reversal. First let's understand the factor equalization. Now I just told you that Px by Py was 1.4 in country 1 and Px by Py equals to 4 in country 2. So Px is price of x is relatively expensive in country 2 and cheaper in country 1 because x can be produced using labor intensive method, and labor is intensively available in country 1. So country 1 is price is lesser there. So just because labor is extensively available in country 1, so their wages is also lesser than country 2. So actually your px by py change in this ratio is decided by changing the wage upon may interest rate. So this is the concept here. Okay, now we assume that labor cannot migrate. If labor could migrate, then if they are getting less wages in country 1 and they are getting more in country 2, so they will migrate to this place, and increasing the supply of labor in country 2, they will end up decreasing the price of wages. But migration of labor is not possible, so this differentiation will be removed by the trade. Now what will happen? This was our price ratio. Now country 1 will increase the production of good x and country 2 will increase the production of y. So in country 1 the demand for labor increases. When your demand for labor increases, your wages increases and your W by R ratio increases. Getting me? So if your W by R increasing, your price ratio will increase. So this was lesser in country 1. Now this is going to increase, reaching to 1 by 2, then reaching to 1. Okay, so this is going to increase in country 1. Now let's see in country 2. They were producing Y. So demand of labor decreases. When demand of labor decreases, W by R decreases. When W by R decreases, Px by Py decreases in country 2. So they will reducing this and reaching something like 1 or 3 or 2, anything. So they will come from 4 to 2 and they will come from 1.4 to 2. So their absolute price will become equal in both the countries by using this Heckscher-Ohlin trade theory. This is the concept explained by the Heckscher-Ohlin as termed as factor equalization theory. Now this is the diagram. If your wage interest ratio will increase, then your price will increase. So this, now one more concept is related to this, that is Toppler-Samuelson theorem. We will discussing in the further class. Now let's come to the factor intensity reversal. Factor intensity reversal actually explained a specialization case in which X is labor intensive in country 1 but it is capital intensive in country 2. अभी तक we were assuming that X can be produced using labor intensive method in both the countries, but now X is labor intensive in country 1 and X is capital intensive in country 2. So you required more capital to produce X in country 2. So country 2 will be producing Y using labor intensive method because it require capital to produce X. Okay? So X can be produced using labor in country 1 and Y can be produced in country 2 using labor. So when they start trade, the production of X increases in country 1 and production of Y increases in country 2. Whenever they will trade, the demand for labor is going to increase in both the countries and ultimately wage rate will increase in both the countries. So this is known as the condition of factor intensity reversal. which is not much present in the world, but this is an exceptional case if you could find this here. Now we are left with two things: the offer curves and the empirical evidence of Heckscher-Ohlin theory. This we will be discussing in the next class, because first I want you to clear the basic understanding of Heckscher-Ohlin, because offer curve requires much more understanding than this simple trade theory. So I'll be taking the new topic in the next class. Till then, you just understand this topic from here, then read it from the Salvatore. If you have any doubt, then feel free to ask me in the comment section. Then I'll be starting with the offer curve in the next video. I hope you really like the video. If you understand the topic of Heckscher-Ohlin, then please subscribe my channel if you haven't done yet. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you. Have a nice day.